This guy, Flash Thompson, he probably deserved what happened. But just because you can beat him up doesn't give you the right to. Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and we promised it last time when we reviewed Amazing Spider-Man 49, also known as Amazing Spider-Man 850. El Percherino himself said that he would come on the channel. We would review Amazing Spider-Man 50, the other milestone back-to-back comic book in back-to-back weeks. So Spider-Man is definitely putting a drain on the old wallet these days. And this is the big story we've all been working towards, Perch. Who is Kindred? Nick Spencer and Ryan Ottley have basically been teasing this since the very first issue of the relaunch of Amazing Spider-Man, which I believe was right after issue 800. Or of course it was. That was the end of Dan Slott's run, and we're finally getting there. And this is like I said in the last video. Remember, I was like, this felt like the pay-per-view event before SummerSlam. Well, this is SummerSlam. This is the main event. We're going to finally reveal who the big villain is. Obviously, Perch, you are with me. How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. And you got 2 Spider-Man anniversary issues in 2 weeks. Who would have ever thought?
Yeah, it's the Legion of Doofus is at their finest, but I do enjoy this comic book. In fact, I'm rating it the same as I did the last one, but for different reasons. I think this is a cool story. It's more interesting than the last one. The 850 was just like popcorn fun. This one's a bit more cerebral, some more moving parts to it. I think the art takes a tick up. I think Patrick Gleason does a great job here, but this does have some flaws. Yeah,
absolutely. It is a very different book. You're right about that. And I mean, hitting on the art, Gleason, I liked it too. I saw a lot of complaints about the art online, and I think there is something to be said of he'll get kind of used to this character and kind of the right mechanics of how to do Spider-Man and everything else. But I have no complaints about any of this. I think it looks great, and I think the coloring works real well. And I'm excited to see Gleason on this title for an extended period of time.
Oh, absolutely. So we get the initial introduction. We get Kindred coming in. I think he knocked that one out of the park. This middle shot is absolutely my favorite. It's Norman Osborn and the Sin Eater are having a little confrontation. He's got the mask and it's all elongated. Thought it looked like $1 million. But this image on the right here, I do think this was a miss. I don't know why that would be a splash page with Spidey's hands and he can see. This is essentially the monster that comes out of Sin Eater when Kindred kind of releases it. So overall, I think the art was fantastic. I thought it popped a little bit. It popped really well when Spider-Man's on the page. When it's the rest of the story, it is pretty dark. But this is a very dark story.
It is. I mean, this is meant to be. I've heard a lot of comparisons to say this is Nick Spencer trying to do his Kraven's Last Hunt style story. There's a lot of kind of elements of that.
Very good point. I would almost say that, like in this comic book, much like Kraven's Last Hunt, Kraven's Last Hunt is really a Kraven story, and Spider-Man's almost a supporting character in here. I would say Spider-Man is a supporting character, at least in this issue.
Yeah, the goal here is to build up some of the villains, the dynamic between Kindred and certainly Norman Osborn, and we don't, it becomes clear why at the end of the issue that dynamic is important to this book. But it is yeah, I mean, Spider-Man is pushed backward, and I think that the rest of the issues won't play out the same way, but it was definitely an issue designed to focus on the villain that's been chasing him now for 50 issues or so.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I found this comic book, the first read, pretty confusing because it's not told in a linear fashion. We start at the end and move to the beginning, and it's kind of jumping around, and I thought it was a little confusing, but we're going to focus on the 3 main characters and then a couple of plot points. We'll talk about Norman Osborn and Sin Eater first, and we'll talk kind of about Kindred and Sin Eater, then we'll talk about Spidey. So at the beginning, we do see Kindred, but then the story gets in, and the first thing I'm confused about is why is Sin Eater not look like the Juggernaut anymore?
Yeah, I am too. Like this would be in a place where you should at least have one little line of like, hey, I expended my energy getting out of the liquefied concrete or whatever it happens to be. My clothes, I found a new jacket on the ground, so that's cool. I'm looking good again. I don't know. That was disappointing to me in the sense of You know, people still say you worry too much about continuity, but this was 1 week ago. Like this was continuity, literally last issue.
Well, it seems like 5 minutes ago, right?
Exactly. It bugged me too. Of like, so I was wondering, is like, oh, is this a different character? Is this maybe one of the other kind of Sin Eater people that is cornered Osborn? Is the Juggernaut Sin Eater still down in the ground? What's going on? But no, this is clearly the Sin Eater. There needed to be some resolution to that, or at least some explanation of how we went from one to the other, because it takes some of the punch away from the previous issue.
Yeah, it takes you, you're a little discombobulated. You're like, that's not the character I expected to see. But so they have their encounter, and at first, Norman Osborn's kind of mocking him, and then he's begging for mercy kind of thing, and then he's saying, like, kind of do it, because, you know, obviously Norman Osborn is a little crazy now because he's the Green Goblin. But the Sin Eater does have his cleansing shotgun and decides he's going to take out Norman Osborn. And when he does that, he takes on the, I guess, the powers or the sins of the Green Goblin into himself. Interesting thing, but the most interesting part of that is, I guess, I didn't put two and two together on the last issue. I didn't realize that I thought Spider-Man just wanted to get Norman Osborn away from his friend so he wouldn't kill him. I didn't realize he was feeding him back to the Sin Eater, and essentially he's sent this man to his death.
Yeah, that was one of the outcomes. So that was an odd part about this issue is Spider-Man feels some guilt about what he's done, about handing him back to the demon or back to Sin Eater. But the way it played out in the previous issue, the Sin Eater was still trapped, trying to get away. Norman, he was kicking him out. Basically, fend for yourself was how it read in the previous issue. Of like, you know, maybe Norman will escape. He's got a good chance of escaping because Sin Eater's still down in the concrete or whatever. And so it wasn't to me a sacrifice to the demon. But in this issue, they play it out very specifically as Spider-Man did something very wrong. He went against his better judgment, and he basically handed somebody over to the villain to get sacrificed. And that plays out very strange, considering we had multiple issues of the Spider Friends, the Order of the Web, kind of going back and forth on what to do. And it's just, that was a very convoluted kind of mess of a plot point. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be one that we're now going to deal with for the next several issues of Spider-Man feeling he made a mistake. And what are we supposed to do about that? And how do you forgive yourself for doing this? That was a pretty big misstep for me.
I agree. So that one didn't settle well with me. So after this, the Sin Eater has taken, Green Goblin, and I guess he's fulfilled his quest for Kindred. He goes back and he visits him, and the giant centipede himself is talking to him, and basically he says, but you're a hypocrite because you haven't repented all of your sins. And he kind of takes him back to a moment in his life, and he says, like, you're the one that killed your partner. And all of a sudden, this is probably the second most dope page in here. It's when Juggernaut and Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, they're all kind of coming out, and they're kind of ripping Sin Eater apart. But I found this confusing because I don't understand what Kindred's powers are. Why can he take this and summon these demons to rip this man apart?
Yeah, I think Kindred is turned into this bad guy who can do anything the plot needs, and that is his power. And I don't know how that plays out. I mean, clearly there's some demonic elements here and everything else, but Kindred is this incredibly strangely defined character. And it reads a little, this issue reads a lot like if it was a different writer from the previous one. It feels like if it's a crossover and you have two different writers who aren't completely on the same page. But of course, both of these comics are written by Nick Spencer, and I think every Kindred appearance has been written by Nick Spencer. So it's confusing to me. I mean, he's in charge of what we're seeing on the page, and it feels very, very convoluted.
Also, I thought when Sin Eater took on like the Green Goblin's power, he would have had like the powers of Juggernaut, Green Goblin, and anyone else whose shotgun he used onto him to kind of repent or to cleanse their sins, and he would have taken their powers on. Seemed like he would have been a worthy foe at that point.
I would think so. I mean, it's unclear when he's taking on these sins, he's getting their power, and we saw that with the previous issue with Juggernaut. In this issue, he's lost that power, or it's still in there, or maybe it's just taking a nap. unclear what's going on. Does he still have the power of Juggernaut? Just doesn't look that way. What does the power of the Green Goblin actually mean? Is it his power? Is it his psychosis? Is it that he's super clever and crafty now? I mean, just what exactly is going on here? And I mean, you can kind of fill in the gaps for yourself, and that's cool. But again, there's a lot that is left with question marks in this comic, and that comes up to a plot point I think we're going to get to in a minute.
So let's get to Spidey himself. And I do want to say this about the art. While as I think Patrick Gleason really did great on this comic book, I think he's fantastic on Spider-Man, and I think we'll see it. You know, when we get some brighter issues, people are really going to see this as his character. That's a character that's built for him. I don't think he's really built to illustrate Doctor Strange. He looks a little bit more like Victor Price here.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the only thing about the art that I didn't really love, other than that one splash page that didn't seem necessary. But this is kind of the beginning. Spidey is, you know, he's running for his life. Apparently, he needs to go to Doctor Strange, and he's gonna get healed up. And he's got him in this, I don't know, this spell. And then there's some points here that I'm just confused about because they're talking, and he said, I had to. Okay, this is where he's talking about handing Norman Osborn to the Sin Eater. Or at least I thought I had to. He was going to kill again. We all knew it. What kind of choice did I have? And he says, whether it was to save lives or not, you made a deal with a demonic entity. But isn't that one really talking about one more day?
Yeah, I don't think. Well, I mean, that's true. That happened also in his past. I think in this instance, they are talking about current. It's a little hard to tell when things are happening here. The conversation could go in many different directions. Is it that he's referencing, you know, handing Norman Osborn over to the Sin Eater, which is got demonic powers to him, but that's the deal he made? Is he talking about Mephisto? Where is, you know, which deal is he referring to here? Yeah. And maybe it's an error to Spider-Man. I mean, like, man, you made a lot of deals with a bunch of demonic entities. What are you doing here? I don't think this is one more day related, but it certainly could be.
Because he says, did you really think that wouldn't come back to haunt you? Like, as soon as I read that line, I was like, oh, he's talking about one more day. It's like, when did it come up? I don't remember that part happening. So they're probably talking about the Sin Eater portion, but he's kind of requesting help from Doctor Strange because very bad things are happening. That's where we start to learn some information. Apparently, once Kindred's summon these demons and they go after Spider-Man in the Order of the Web where they are, he just like he turned them into demons.
Yeah, he basically infected all of the Spider Buddies into kind of demon versions. And if you look at the covers, you know, down the road, it looks like all of them are kind of infected on some level. And I mean, this is kind of my biggest, I think, issue with this comic is I don't know the handling of these other characters in his life, from the Spider-Gwen to Miles Morales to Silk to whoever. I mean, it's what is the point of these characters? They show up, they just hang out in the last issue and try and argue over what Spider-Man's going to do. Here, they're all turned into demonic, you know, possessed, and they're going to go after Spider-Man. Why are we toying with Spider-Man on this level? Why? What are you doing here? I just think it doesn't help the characters themselves. And I don't know if this conflict is particularly interesting for Spider-Man to see him go after his friends. We kind of saw this last year with Absolute Carnage when Miles was infected. I mean, it's just like, how often are we going to have to see, you know, Peter's friends who on different days are sometimes called, you know, the better than Spider-Man. These are the true heroes. These are the ones that are going to carry the torch on for tomorrow. But constantly they're used as just, you know, throwaway foils to Spider-Man because they get easily possessed or taken over or whatever. And my take of the whole you made a deal with the devil was, you know, you handed you handed Norman Osborn over to Sin Eater, and this is
basically what gave the last thing that he needed to fulfill his quest. Right,
and this is the consequence of it. All your friends are turned into like spider demon monsters, and they've got creepy eyes, and they're coming after you.
Okay, well.
But who knows? I don't know.
So what's interesting, all this is obviously leading up to the reveal of actually who Kindred is. We're not sure exactly what the power set is. and this probably feels like I'm going overly negative for a comic book that I'm actually recommending. Like I said, it's confusing, but I like it. There's a lot of cool moving parts. I just, there's just a few things that confuse me. But we definitely got thrown for a little curveball at the very opening. I can't remember exactly which character it is, but there's a Stacy family member tombstone that Kindred is removing a body from, and he's like preparing a table to have dinner with Peter Parker, I guess. And then we get this reveal that it's that character and Gwen Stacy. And we had thought that maybe Kindred was Gwen Stacy, or that was one of the prime suspects, or the other one would have been Harry Osborn. Like, what did you think about the curveball at the beginning? Was it?
Yeah, I mean, so in my mind, so one of the the big culprit of the big kind of money on favorite of who Kindred was who it turned out to be, and I think they kind of tipped that hand in the there you go. They kind of tipped that hand in the second page. He's digging up Captain Stacy, and then he puts Captain Stacy and Gwen on the table together. Again, I can't figure out, like, what is Kindred's plan here? Is it release the demonic elements from, get Sin Eater to collect souls and then release them to infect Spider-Man's friends so they can chase him around Manhattan while meanwhile you set up a dinner table with the corpses of the Stacys? Like, what are you doing? So
this is where I think this actually does connect with One More Day. We know Harry Osborn is in the 616.
Right.
He's got a son named Normie. He's best friends with Dylan Brock. But that's not the original Harry Osborn. There's another Harry Osborn that was essentially wiped away when Spider-Man made a deal with Mephisto in One More Day. And I believe this is that version of Harry Osborn coming back.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that that was kind of the speculation that this character was exactly that, was as a result of Spider-Man's deal with Mephisto. Now, why Doctor Strange would be all tied up in that and know that? I mean, at this point, does Spider-Man know that Kindred is Harry? I don't think so. I don't think that's been revealed to him yet. So I don't know why that conversation would reference that, but that's exactly right. I think that this is a time or reality displace, basically, that the Harry went down to Mephisto's realm or whatever it happens to be, and then escaped and became Kindred, and that's what we've got here. Anyway, that's what it looks like. So this is not a bad reveal. I mean, I think in terms of logical, villain tied into past storylines, somebody who can be a major new threat and cause some damage, Harry Osborn from the previous reality, that's cool. That fits. I think that's an interesting threat. Why he's going through all these different kind of crazy shenanigans to get to Peter is a little odd, but I mean,
Peter essentially, through his own will and deal with Mephisto, wished him out of existence.
Oh, sure, I get but why hurt him? Yeah, I'm on board with that. What's the plan? Why is the plan? Yeah, he has a dumb plan. Like, with all the powers he has, like, he's messing around with Mysterio and he's doing. I mean, just there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, he put together a complex 50-issue plan to get at Peter, and I just he's got a lot of reasons to go after him. And he seems all powerful. Like, so anyway,
very powerful. Ambiguous power set. That's probably one of my biggest complaints. Like, how is that character doing that? So that'll essentially wrap up our review of Amazing Spider-Man 50. This is a recommend. It's not a highly recommend, but there's some issues with it as far as it's a bit convoluted and stuff like that. Here's another thing that's bothering me. Not only did we have Spider-Man 850 followed by Spider-Man 50, but next week we've got Spider-Man 50 like LR.
Yeah. I love it when letters.
I jumped off Amazing Spider-Man because it kept getting interrupted by events. I'm interested enough in Last Remains and Kindred and seeing how this story goes that I'm jumping back in. I really like Patrick Gleason. I think Nick Spencer's done a fine job on Amazing Spider-Man. Not the greatest run ever, but it's still good. But now that they have these LR issues, if I need to read those to understand the story, I'm jumping back off.
Yeah, and I don't think you will have to. From the indications, these are just going to show the Order of the Web, I guess, running around kind of trying to deal with the fact that they're possessed is kind of the point to them, I suppose. And again, I'm not sure why we need that comic. I mean, just it was a year ago. We had Absolute Carnage with plenty of those issues of Miles running around trying to deal with being possessed. So why we're doing that again, I don't know. But I mean, this is Marvel, I guess, trying to squeeze out every last dollar of these events. And you know, maybe don't. Maybe it's hard if you take a step back and look at this whole thing, not to go, hey, you did an anniversary issue followed by an anniversary issue followed by a bunch of bi-weekly shipping, you know, with in between that a bunch of .lr issues to kind of pad out the story. It's like that's a kind of stuff.
And you just depowered Juggernaut, even though you just relaunched Juggernaut.
Yeah, it annoys people. It absolutely it irritates fans. It hits the wallet. It takes a story that, you know, could have stood on its own and just bloats it all the way out. I don't know. That stuff drives me nuts. I like the issue 2 generally. I think not quite as much as you, but I still liked it. I think it's nice to be finally getting to this plot point. But I can see enough at this point. This event, Last Remains, could go thoroughly south. It could go either way. Either this could have a really satisfying payoff and it kind of builds up from here, or, and unfortunately, my money is on it's going to be a downhill slope from here, and it's just going to, you know, 8 issues later, we're going to be very tired of this whole thing. But I hope I'm wrong. That sounds very negative.
So I do have one last question for you. What are your thoughts about them basically promoting Spider-Man 850 as the return of the Green Goblin, and then in Spider-Man 50, the Green Goblin is no more. His power has been taken away.
Yeah, I mean, why you're promoting the return of the Green Goblin anyway? I mean, it is like, how many times do we have to have the return of the Green Goblin? It's like, hey, look, kids, it's a Green Goblin. Please, you don't need to have the Green Goblin as the return. I mean, just that to me says you're out of ideas at this point that you're promoting that in the first place. But yeah, then it's a kick to the gut of, hey, this thing we promoted was really kind of for one issue, sort of, and he was working.
Maybe somebody went and bought like 3 extra covers because it's their favorite villain, only to be kicking the nuts the next week to realize the Green Goblin's not really bad.
I hope nobody out there is buying 3 extra copies. But anyway, I'm with you. It's goofy, and I think that now they did throw a little bit in here somewhere of, you know, he'll go back to being the Green Goblin. He always does. There's kind of a throwaway line in the comic where it indicated that, you know, none of this stuff Sin Eater was doing was permanent, probably. So I mean, yeah, we look forward to the.
Well, then why is the story that we just read important?
Yeah, I guess they're going to take those sins and those demonic forces, and they're going to use them to power up Spider-Woman and Miles, and then chase Peter around the city. I mean, sure, why not? Why not?
I mean, that's like one of the slippery slope when you half sell what you just did.
Yeah, I agreed. I think it's a mistake, and I wish they wouldn't do stuff like that.
I'm back on Amazing Spider-Man. I'm going to see where it's going. I'm not going to get the LR issues, but hopefully it's good. I'm digging the Patrick Gleason art. Whoever says he needs time with the character, I think you're nuts. I think it looks great. It's just darker because this is a very dark story.
Yeah.
I think his art was fantastic, and I don't know. I enjoyed it. This is a recommend, not a highly recommend. This is a recommend. It's an enjoyable comic book. You get a big payoff, and I think it was done pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, if you've been following along Spider-Man to this point, if you're a part of the Nick Spencer relaunch, you kind of have to get this. It's, you know, it is that payoff.